Hi, my name's Trevor Church. I'm a former conservative. I'm independent now for the past 2 years. I'm a father of 3, a veteran, and I have an essay that I'd like to read to you today that I wrote. Here we go. I realize that I'm not pretty or young, but I ask you to give me a few minutes of your time anyways, because I'm talking about some very controversial subjects. Let's talk about human rights for a minute. So here we go. Human rights ebb and flow throughout history. No matter how much power a government takes away from its citizens, eventually there will be a correction. Personal power taken is personal power that is given. Eventually a large enough group will take back that personal power and redistribute it for a hopefully more appropriate balance. Just take a look at our neighbors to the south, all the way to the South Pole. Some governments get overthrown once and some multiple times. In America, we are very aware of what armed conflict would do to our country. So we try to limit our conflicts to words and laws. We demand it as a nation. If any group becomes a threat, it is squashed effectively and mercilessly by the government, sometimes a bit overzealously, but for the most part, they seem to try to do well, although they sometimes err on the side of caution. I'm not going to cite sources, you can Google it, and I'm not here to criticize our system of government because we need it to survive as a nation. But I think it's time that we used our freedom of speech to force change. Right now, with every electronic exposure, you're being told what to think. If it is entertainment, you're choosing not to think. So don't be surprised when things break down if you haven't been looking for answers or questioning what you're told. Like Pavlovian dogs, we have been trained since birth to distance ourselves from anyone else's less than ideal situation by slapping a label on it. This is the behavior of self-protection, because if we felt bad for every bad or wrong thing that happened, nothing would ever be able to make us feel happiness. So we automatically distance ourselves in all but a few cases, such as 9/11. Acts of war and terrorism or natural disasters, they always unify us because every American recognizes that as an external threat. As a nation, we are vigilant against external threats and internal threats, such as jihadist terrorist cells. Just an example. Not singling anybody out. What I choose to address are those internal threats which we're not aware of, which we're not perceiving because they're so natural in our society. Or maybe they're just undefined or unexplained. So let me ask you something. How do you filter the news? Do you just accept what they tell you until you call bullshit on something? Fake news, the term fake news exclusively seems to apply to politics. Politics used to be about arguing over issues, from my point of view at least. But politics has changed from arguing and debating over the issues to simply creating a narrative. Any self-serving narrative will do. Politicians from opposite sides rarely speak to each other. They're busy building or crafting a narrative for their base. So I only use one filter when reading or watching anything about politics. One simple rule that makes it easy to trust my own opinion. I disbelieve and reject any opinion or characterization by the news writer or the speaker, and only form my own political opinions when I hear it come out of that person's mouth directly. I don't even care if it's a representative of the party. I don't care. I want to hear it directly from that person before I form an opinion of that person. And I'm pretty well stuck to my guns. All right, so part two, the wind picked up a bit. A direct quote from that politician will I allow myself to form an opinion directly from the words that come out of their mouth or a tweet. In today's world, I don't even use Twitter. I do follow my own favorite for president on social media, but I don't follow social media that much either. But Trump's tweets are always making the news, so a tweet from Trump is the same thing as a quote. And that's what I form my opinions on, what he says, not what people think of him. So, yeah, not even from a representative of the party. I just don't care. I want to hear it or read it from that person, whether it's Trump, AOC, Warren, or Bernie. I don't care who it is. I don't believe anything that's said about them, because rarely do you hear an impassioned news article. I don't use Twitter. Let's see. I'm not here to influence people politically or endorse a candidate, though I do have my favorite just like you. Back to the subject at hand, the toxic political atmosphere. Politicians used to sling mud at their opponents, and even though there was a winner and a loser, there was still an air of respectability on both sides. That changed when Roger Stone normalized the villainization of one's opponent. Now, under the Trump administration, that behavior has escalated to criminalization of your opponent, with winning as the only goal. Just winning for your team or for yourself. Now look, our country is out of balance right now. Wall Street was the mechanism by which the investor, the top 1% or less, transformed our nation from one that was of the people, by the people, and for the people, to one where profit is the only motivator. And the excuse is that we are a nation of laws, not men. Well, when money influences and effectively controls many, if not most, decisions, then the will of the people no longer matters. This has left our nation unbalanced, a ripe, fertile ground for a megalomaniac with a me-first agenda and attitude. While past presidents have no doubt profited from their office, as they were at least presidential about it, as a nation, we look to our leaders for guidance. And when our leaders exhibit or endorse the lowest forms of human behavior, of communication available, and play follow the Trump, they are endorsing bullying, lying, misdirection, extortion. And they say these don't apply to us, for we make the law and are exempt from it. The Republicans have tried to get me personally to believe that North Korea is a good person to be friends with, that Saudi Arabia is our friend, that Yemen deserves to be bombed but is not allowed to fight back. How can they be rebels if Saudi is invading? The Saudis can chop people up as long as they claim, not have, plausible deniability. Doesn't matter to us, because they're our friends through money. But let's examine that for a second. Aren't we meeting our national oil production quotas? Aren't we exceeding those at this point in time right now? But the Republicans would have you believe, or me believe, that our oil production is not being met nationally. So we need the Saudi Arabia's oil, and electric cars, the new Green Deal, that's all a bad thing. And with those options in front of us, I don't believe you anymore that we need to be friends with people who oppress others like Saudi Arabia is. They want me to believe that the tariff war against China wasn't to protect big oil. As soon as we start talking about the new Green Deal, they shoot it down. Or as soon as they started talking about the new Green Deal and AOC, they started making it all about cow farts and stuff, just trying to distract but at the same time, we're supposed to disbelieve the actual truth that we don't have to live with exhaust fumes anymore in the next 10 years maybe. Straight up lying about global warming is simply so that they don't have to do anything about it. Because if Trump admitted that the world was changing as a result of human intervention, then we would demand that, and we are demanding, that they take responsibility, that we as a nation take responsibility for our part in this. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is the truth and what we should be doing. But under Trump, the Republican Party has come closer to dissolving than at any time since the last time. Remember the contract with America? Well, the Republicans went to restructure, but they really didn't change their message. They just kind of rebolstered themselves and came back stronger than ever. And their message has always been a me first, us first, white people first, landowners, it's now first. Okay, this whole thing about disenfranchising American citizens, it all comes from not admitting that we're born with these rights, and that's their excuse, because it's not in the Constitution. It doesn't mean anything. And once we recognize that it is a new world, and the Constitution is a middleman, it's the only one we got, and I don't minimize the difficulties. I understand. I've heard the difficulties in a congressional convention, how difficult it would be. But if enough people agree, we can do anything. So Republicans have been leaving the party in waves, starting with Paul Ryan. Whether or not Trump is impeached or reelected, the Republican Party will need some serious restructuring and reform before I, at least, am going to take them seriously ever again. Right now, I believe that the only thing holding the Republican Party together is money and the morally bankrupt base of Southern fried Christianity. But this is about half of Trump's base, with the ones who don't get their being fed from the pulpit. They get fed through Fox, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and others. It's a very narrow spectrum narrative that serves to manufacture rage. When I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, I always felt like I was smart. I always felt it like I trusted the Republicans, and I always felt like the Democrats were the enemy, and I always had this manufactured rage inside of me. My father and my brother, they carry that manufactured rage around with them every single day, even now. They still listen to Rush Limbaugh every day, and that's how they get fed. So as a result, they're full of rage and hate. And I'm sorry about that. So this manufactured rage, that's where we're looking for a solution. What causes this manufactured rage? Well, that's where the cure to not just racism, but the whole cycle of dividing, villainizing, criminalizing. Pretty soon they'll be demonizing, and then we'll be okay with them burning witches at the stake again. I've looked at this for 2 years, and I've really come to the conclusion that the only way that I see to end this vicious cycle is for us to demand that we remove the labels in the media and in the government. Anybody speaking to the American public, we need to remove all of these labels which designate them as other, divisive, African American, To me, that says they're from way over in Africa. It's got not much to do with America. So it's a confusing set of rules for those who don't believe in racism. What I'm saying is that label of African American, to me, they're just American citizens. So the rest of the country, they're African Americans. So that separates them, makes them other. Calling me white, I'm not white, not even close to white, but I'm called white because that's a label that they can put on me to focus their rage, which is not unearned. But I respectfully suggest to you that we take a beat, examine the way that our freedom of speech is gone, and agree to restore some balance to the dialogue we use as a nation. I do not believe that we need to infringe on that right to freedom of speech for the individual, but we do need to reestablish a new cultural baseline to moderate our speech and return to a standard that is respectful, at the very least, in our media and politics. Once our leadership relearns, and media relearns, the art of humanized public speaking, the return of dignity will become possible once again. What kind of labels am I talking about? Whether it's black, African American, gay, LGBT, white, Muslim, Christian, essentially any label that identifies ourselves or any American as other than a citizen. I propose a grassroots movement could change the atmosphere of our nation and force our media and government officials to cease and desist with slander and characterizations that dehumanize. My proposal is such that we could remove all labels that promote racism or division, creating a public consumption of unity. This could be done for all news organizations and politicians, while still allowing individuals the right to free speech. Let our leadership set a new standard of decency, and the nation will follow. But how could we possibly manage to force our politicians to comply? Simply agreement. If everybody agrees that our language needs to change, then eventually we will change it. Look at what we have done in the school system. We have changed the way that we educate our children, and it's vastly superior to the system I grew up with. So we can do better. We just need to understand that we can, and we need to hold ourselves and others. We need to hold our leaders to a higher standard than we hold ourselves, not a lower. But how could we manage something that seems so complex? It's simple as this. Call everybody an American citizen. If they're not an American citizen, call them that country citizen or world citizen if you don't know. Simple as that. I know it sounds weird, and the red and the conservative, the red side, they'll be all, oh man, that sounds too much like calling people comrade. But the truth is, we need a symbol of respect that everybody can speak, because it's true that form follows function to a certain extent. We will never unify our nation until we stop using divisive language. We must stop labeling ourselves or others. Stupid? Maybe. But is it more stupid to continue on this path to destruction? Thank you for your time. You have a blessed day.